Hello strongmen. If you're feeling overwhelmed, stressed and stuck, you're not alone. At the Strongmen, we understand the relentless stress and pressure, but recognise that mastering challenges plays a key role in becoming a better version of ourselves. TSM is a growing community whose purpose is to redefine the strongman and empower men like you to transform stress into strength. I'm Christo, your host, and together we'll develop physical mastery, mental toughness and collective strength to forge a life marked by calmness, confidence and control. Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Strongmen podcast. Thanks very much for checking out the episode, and thanks to you as well if you've left a review on the podcast. I have seen a few more go up in recent times, and I really appreciate that. I put a post up on social media the other day and it was titled "Why I'm Leaving the Fitness Industry." Now, I got a lot of comments being like, "You'll be missed," and we need more coaches like you, don't leave, etc. And I just wanted to clarify that I'm not going anywhere in particular. I am very disillusioned with the fitness industry, and one of my friends summed it up perfectly, and he said, the fitness industry is about the appearance of health, not health itself. And I was like, 100%, that is absolutely the case. And I'm feeling very disillusioned by that fact. In particular, I'm frustrated about the whole before-after photos, the transformations. Exercise is not just about changing how your body looks. It's not a tool for fat loss. It's literally something that can change your life. But the fitness industry is not caught up to that fact. And unfortunately, there's a lot of people feeding off of people's insecurities to therefore boost their own income and business, and I'm sick of it, to be honest. I'm really sick of it. And also, don't get me on to the amount of misinformation and shit coaches as well. You can become a coach yourself in the space of a few weeks. All you need to do is pay 4 figures, run through the course, which consists of online modules, a couple of practical training days maybe, and some assessments, and that's it. You're done. You've free reign to do whatever you like. There's absolutely nobody looking over you. And that means you can use fear tactics. You can use punishment. You can really fuck people up. And there's no consequences for it. So as you can probably hear, I'm a bit pissed off. I'm a bit frustrated with the fitness industry. But I have taken a lot of time to think through my next steps, and I'm kind of taking a sidestep. I'm sort of repositioning myself, I guess, because I don't really want to be affiliated or associated with the fitness industry anymore. I had a really valuable conversation with someone in terms of business, and they quite rightly highlighted, you're going against the grain, you're swimming against the tide here when it comes to the fitness industry. Either you need to align yourself with the message of the industry, which is that appearance of health is most important and will help you look a certain way through exercise and nutrition. You either need to focus on that, or you need to take yourself out of the industry and maybe look at health more broadly. And that definitely aligns more with my values and allows me to, and actually since this isn't something that I've decided to do recently, over the last number of months I've sort of slowly transitioned away from solely doing sort of fitness content, messaging around fitness, and I've been broadening the approach a little bit, and it feels so much better. I feel more at home in this kind of well-being sphere. So I put up this post the other day on Instagram just explaining everything I've just said, really, and highlighting the fact that I'm kind of not going to refer to myself as a personal trainer anymore. I will still have fitness as one of my main passions, one of the main things that I help guys with, but it's just going to be one component of many. Like when it comes to improving health and well-being, that actually makes sense, because yes, of course, exercise is really important and really powerful in improving people's physical and mental well-being, but there's so much more to it as well. There's so much more to it, which, I've barely even scratched the surface of in the past anyway. So I'm taking this broader approach from now on. My messaging, my content, it is going to shift slightly, so it's not just going to be the fitness orientated stuff. And I feel really good about that. It feels like the right thing to do, the right fit. And it also has just taken away a lot of frustration immediately, pretty much, because I'm, like I say, no longer swimming against the tide. I'm no longer trying to fight and change people's perception in fitness, in the fitness industry. And I will admit there's a tinge of sadness there, because my hope was that I could have a significant impact in some people's lives to kind of help them understand that, fitness is much more than body composition and transformations. It's as I said earlier, it's life-changing stuff for most people, or it can be. And that's not kind of played out. I feel like I've been disadvantaged in many ways for pushing that message. Again, the person I was chatting to said, if someone's scrolling through Instagram and they come across a before or after photo and you just talking, or your client talking about their positive experience of working with you, which one are they likely going to pick? And they were quite right. It's a no-brainer for most people who are in that mindset of fitness and in that fitness sphere. It is like, body composition, that's what they're looking for. It's not what you're offering, unfortunately. I do hope one day to maybe return to the fitness industry in some capacity, and I say that like I'm leaving it fully. I'm not. I'm still doing my one-to-one coaching and the strongman work. I'm just taking that broader approach, as I say. But I do hope to return to the fitness industry in some capacity, a fuller capacity, to try again, basically, and to really plug away with this message and try and help people shift away from this mindset of seeing fitness as this tool for fat loss and body comp. Anyway, I've gone on a bit of a tangent already. Instead of trying to shoehorn this into the start of an interview, I'll come back to this, I think, for a future episode and explain a bit more in depth about my own experience of being in the fitness industry, why I've decided to leave it in this way, and maybe share some experiences and also some hopes for the industry in the future. But yeah, for now, let's just leave that there, because otherwise this interview will become that, and I don't want that to be the case. We've got more important things to get to, and that is hearing from Christo Hudson. Christo is a mental health consultant and training provider. He's got a really interesting story and sort of path into the well-being sector, I suppose, and we cover some really important topics, in particular suicide prevention, and we also talk a little bit about business as well towards the end. So we'll just get into the interview then, shall we? If you somehow zoned out and missed the sort of preamble, which is very easy to do when you're listening to me, just a quick reminder, trigger warning, we do talk about suicide quite a lot in this, but I do trust that you will find it helpful. Okay, cheers. Today on the Strongmen podcast, I'm delighted to have Christo Hudson with us today, and we're just going to begin by throwing it straight over to you, Christo. I was wondering if you could start by giving us a short introduction of yourself and what it is you do.
Thanks, Chris. Nice to see you. Yeah, especially when someone says a short intro, like I talk for a living, so it's always quite difficult. Yeah, my name's Christo. My parents gave me the name Christopher, and I've spent 42 years explaining that away. Yeah, I'm a dad of 4. I'm married. I'm up in Edinburgh. I've been up here for 24 years now. Came up to Edinburgh as a university student and then never left. My background is in aviation. I flew planes for 20 years. And towards the end of that career as a black box investigator. So I was looking at loads of data and trying to work out what was going on in people's lives. And then a rather sensational, spectacular redundancy ended me in a place where I had to learn quite quickly that mental health was a thing. It wasn't just yoga and Pilates and lattes. It wasn't just that. So I went through a rather turbulent part of my life that took me to a place where I had to kind of make a decision of what I was going to do with it. And it kind of just made sense. There were a couple of moments and events that happened where it took me to realize that actually I was more than just my job role. and that actually maybe there was a little bit more I had to give. So I now predominantly work in the world of suicide prevention and shining a light on the subjects that people tend to shy away from. So I deliver training courses, I do keynote speeches, and I just have conversations about the stuff.
Absolutely, absolutely. It's a great work that you do, no doubt. I just wanted to go back to what you I wanted to go back to what you said about your name, Christopher, because that's also my name. And I was wondering why you go with, you said you've been working on trying to get Christo to be your name and be the name to stick. Have you got an aversion to Christopher as a name?
No, it wasn't me, Chris. It was my parents. It was my parents that had an instant aversion to it. And so they're going to sign me up, get my name inked in a bit of paper, and then they're like, well, we don't really like that. so they got rid of the fur, and I became Christo, and I've always been known as Christo. And it's weird. We talk about what we call the cocktail party syndrome. You suddenly hear your name and like that, and it's weird because when people call me Chris, it's like I don't hear it. It's like, well, they can't be talking to me because that's not my name. And weirdly, that question of our name, plays so much into our identity. Because people ask us day in, day, hey, what's your name? What's your name? And the first thing that comes out of their mouth afterwards is, what do you do? And yeah, it plays so much into it. So I'm glad you've asked. Yeah, Christo rhymes with Bisto is what my children say.
A good way to remember it, definitely. Do you know what's quite interesting is I've actually had a Fair on the podcast. So Fair Nicholson came on. He's also Christopher, so he's taken the sort of end of the name, but you've taken the start. So maybe you two could team up and he works in mental health as well. You could be
like the Ant and Dec.
Yeah, exactly. The Ant and Dec of mental health. There you are. I'll put you in contact with him later. Brilliant. So thank you, Chris. I appreciate that, and it's really good to get to know you. I wanted just to go back to what you said about your career in aviation and flying planes and stuff, and you talked about a tough experience and a turbulent redundancy, is I think the way you kind of put it. So could you share a little bit about how that all played out and how it then led to the work that you do these days?
Yeah, of course. I'm the youngest of four boys, and I was kind of always brought up with this mentality and this idea that when something goes wrong, we don't talk about it. We just put it under the carpet and we kind of just march on. That's what we do. I went to boarding school at the age of 12, an all boys boarding school, and kind of was institutionalized into that mindset from a very young age, not knowing that actually, lack of a difference in generation of oxytocin and testosterone and all those things that go on for men in particular, actually, that there was this unwillingness to talk about what was going on for us when there was a problem. I was always determined that I was going to fly planes. One of the first photos I remember is me, and I'm flying a kite. I used to spend all my spare time flying things, whether it was rockets, throwing little men in parachutes out of windows, doing zip lines, anything that would fly. I was just fascinated by it. And this just absolute, like a determination to fly planes. So when I came up to university and to study mechanical engineering, and I laugh because the course did not float my boat. It was all about getting to the airfield. So I learned to fly up at Lucas, just north of St Andrews. I joined the University Air Squadron, and it was there where I kind of realised this is really what I want to do. So I learned to fly. I would go to university, the lectures that I could attend or wanted to attend, and then I would disappear straight up to Lucas and go and fly planes as much as I could, because that is what brought me joy. That is what brought me happiness. But still, even within that institution of the Royal Air Force, it was this very macho, male-dominated, this concept of you work really hard, but you play really hard as well. Someone at the time saw something in me that they believed that I'd make a good fast jet pilot. And I was kind of repeatedly told, there was something about me, something about my flying ability that meant I was going to be that maverick. It turns out I was more of a goose, and they were slightly wrong. So I was in the fast jet stream, all teed up and absolutely ready to go. Lots of time and effort studying how to fly fast jets, and it just turns out I never cut the mustard. And that was back in 2005, 2006, and that was the first time in my life that I actually kind of failed. I'd succeeded at everything else that I'd put my mind to, and I was like, oh, okay, what do I do with this? So I became a commercial pilot, and it turns out I was actually quite good at that, Chris. I was much better. It was much more of my pace of life rather than 450 knots. It was like, okay, well, let's do things a bit slower. I worked for Flybe Maybe as they were known most of the time, and I worked out of Edinburgh, and I was a first officer, and then I became a captain, became a training captain. And my role there was to fix people's problems. Yeah. So if they couldn't land the plane, they go to the training captain, and the training, hey, well, let's look at it this way. Why don't we reduce the power here, or flare the aircraft at this height? Or when we're speaking to air traffic control, why don't we do it this way? And giving people lots of different perspectives on things to train them with those skills and with that knowledge. Doing that role just lit up my world. I could fly planes, which I always believed I was destined to do. I was good at it. And actually, I could impart that knowledge to other people. So it 100% ticked all the boxes. And I got to live a wonderfully fulfilling life. You can hear the crash. There's no pun there, but you can hear the crash coming. 4th of March, 2020. There are these mutterings of COVID. And my world just got turned upside down overnight. I was in Manchester Airport, ready to come home. We'd just done it was known as a 4-sector day, so Edinburgh to Manchester and back up, and then down to Manchester and back up. And I was training another pilot, and we just knew something was up that night. And we got down there, and then we were told all aircraft were grounded, and they started bringing out the tractors. When I talk about this, people are like, what? Who knew there were all these tractors at airports? But all these John Deere tractors start coming out and parking behind the aeroplanes because they're worth a lot of money and they don't want people to nick them. So the company had gone into administration, and that was it. It was the last time I flew a commercial aircraft. I got home that night, and I remember parking the car outside, and I walked in, and my wife, she kind of looked at me, and she had a classic, like, are you okay? Yeah, absolutely fine. I've got this. Because I'd learnt how to do that, how to mask whenever there was a problem. And the next 6 months unravelled into what we call baths, beards, and booze. Strong beard with you, Chris, but remember when you first started growing that? And people are like, is that real? Are you keeping that? What's that thing? Baths, beards, and booze. That became the next 6 months of my life. What I didn't know is that the baths, beards, and booze were the first signs of clinical depression. And as COVID unravelled and the skies closed and job opportunities instantly disappeared, I just didn't know what to do. All these problems were suddenly under this carpet, and it was massive, and I didn't know what to do. So I grew the dodgy beard. Well, that was me not knowing or having a sense of purpose in life, and what I was going to do with that and do with myself, and how I was going to fulfill those needs to be a man in the family and to be the head of the family and be that provider and be that leader for my children. How am I going to do that? Well, I don't have a sense of purpose. So washing, well, that's going out the window. There's a dodgy beard. The bath, the family bathroom, which is right behind me, I'd put the children to bed, I'd tell them I love them, do all those things, classic masking, and then just hide away in there, tell my wife, yeah, I'm just going away. Yeah, I'm going to go and do a job application. I'm going to do this. And then just, no one could get me there. That was the escapism. Those are those common withdrawal behaviours manifesting themselves. And the booze, my relationship with it became, well, that is the only way I know to escape this state of consciousness. It's cheap, it's quick, it's easy. I know how to do it, and I know how I'll feel if I do that. So I'll just have one more drink. That's where my life went. And my life became very, very dark very quickly. Lots of things happened. But it was one conversation that changed that world, because I had all these people around me that genuinely cared for me and wanted me to be well, but they were all trying to fix it. And all it took was someone to just ask me so simply and succinctly the question of, how are you? But when they meant it, when they said it, they said it with such a sincerity and such a genuineness that it gave me permission to say, you know what, life's pretty crap. Got taken under the wing by some amazing people who were in the well-being space, and they were like, well, come with us, and you've got these skills as a trainer, and you could train other people to do things. What do you think that is? So I trained as a listener, as a peer support worker, and I found that actually by that work, listening to other people, I found that I didn't have to fix their problems. I just had to listen. I just had to see them or hear them or just be with them. And I found that by helping them, I found that actually I helped myself. And in one of these phone calls, I was speaking to a gentleman, and he talked about that pain, and he was contemplating suicide. He didn't know any other way. And I'd felt that pain. People often ask me whether I attempted to take my own life, and I never did. I never attempted to take my own life. But I'd stopped seeing hope. I'd stopped seeing my place in the as a Lion King quote coming here, but I'd stopped seeing my place in the circle of life. I was like, well, I genuinely believed that all I could do was fly planes. It said Captain Christo Hudson, pilot. And without that sense of identity, the pain of that loss of identity, the pain was so much that it's just like, well, what does the future look like? And I remember on this phone call, just empathizing with this person, like, oh my goodness, I can only imagine where you are at now with that pain, but that pain being so much that they wanted that pain to stop. And this realization of what if I could train other people to do that? What if I could train anyone? They don't have to be a counselor, a therapist, or a GP, because I'm not those things. I'm just me. But what if I could train other people not to just jump to fix-it mode all the time? What if I could train people to be able to spot what those signs were, to hold space for someone so they felt genuinely heard, and then to connect them with those supports? Fast forward to 3.5 years, and that's what I do, and that's what lights me up, Chris. It's like there is no crosswind landing into Heathrow that would normally yeah, let's go and do that. There's nothing like that that could give me the sense of purpose and joy when I know that someone's pain has been eased slightly. That's magic.
Amazing. Yeah. That's quite an incredible story, and I was exactly the same. I was greeted with fixes, and all of the things that were suggested were just, of course I've tried all of these things you've talked about. Like, this has been me for years. I've been in this headspace. I've Googled every potential solution possible to try and get myself out of this hole. So telling me that to try to try going out for a walk, or to phone my parents, or I don't know, whatever other suggestion you can think of, I've already thought about that. I've probably even tried it, and it's not made a difference. But what did make such a difference was actually just, as you say, having somebody who could just provide a space for me to talk and actually feel heard. And I had the added bonus of the person I first had that conversation with. They had been in a very similar situation to myself, so they could totally relate to everything that I was saying, and I actually felt not only heard but normal as well. Like, it's not like there's anything wrong with me here, because it's someone else has got this shared experience. So finding someone that you can talk freely with and be heard, it's just life. It can be life changing.
It's magic, it's as simple as that. It's someone genuinely putting those judgments aside, or also saying, yeah, Chris, you're having a crap time, and I see that, rather than saying, you're having a crap time, let's make it better. Like, it's like, okay, just someone accept the fact. And Simon Sinek talks about it all the time, about getting down in the mud with someone, rather than just like looking down and go, oh, it's rubbish down there, let's try and pull them out without getting muddy, because it doesn't work. There's so many roles that we have in life, whether it is a partner or a friend, or in our role, whatever we do, that we're fixing things. And actually, this is something we don't we don't have to do that.
Well, thank you for highlighting that truth, because it's really, really important. Absolutely. I wanted then to talk about suicide and suicide prevention. Obviously, it's a difficult topic, but as you have quite rightly highlighted, the reactions that some people have when they hear or hear the word suicide is like, oh, I don't want to go there. But yet the importance of having these conversations, you can't put a price on. So you've talked about how you've ended up there and that through your sort of life story. I was going to ask to begin with, why do you personally believe the male suicide rate in particular is so high? Obviously it's high generally for both men and women, but for men under the age of 45, I believe it's the biggest killer. So I was wondering if you had any thoughts on that.
The first thing we always have to say is that it's really complicated. It's never just one thing. I think when we look at males' mental health and that idea that it's about fulfilling needs quite often, and understanding for men where that pain can come from is really key. And the first one being an identity factor. If we look at middle-agedness, whenever that is, the statistics are horrific. We're seeing an increase already on 23, on 22, by about 6% in England. Scotland was still yet to get those statistics, but if we look at the identity factor in men and age, if we talk about middle-agedness, for me, it's about a period of reflection. It's a time, our bodies weren't designed to live past the age of 20, I don't think. Look at the state of me. But it's a period of looking back and going, well, right, what I thought life was going to be like, I was going to be physically fit. I was going to fulfill this potential to, procreate and achieve this and achieve that, because that's what the social construct of life says we should do. And that actually, when we then look forward and go, oh my goodness, what does the future look like? Because if they don't match, we can generate internal and emotional distress. And if we don't know how to deal with that distress or pain, it's like, oh, I haven't got the tools to deal with this. Now, normally men have the tools to deal with problems, with things, whether that's manual or intellectually. We have the tools to do that. And if we've never been taught the tools to look after what's going on in here, we can take us to a place where we're like, well, I don't know what to do here in this situation. So middle-agedness and that factor of age, of this comparison of what's the past happen and what's the future look like, and does my future look positive? Have I got the financial status? Have I got the relationship I thought I'd have? Have I got the pension? Have I got the physical fitness and if they don't match, we get this internal jarring. So there's this factor of identity around age in particular. We also look at job roles with males being, genetically, physically stronger, tend to be in gender roles in society where they tend to have access to lethal means. Outside of unemployment, the highest risk factor in industry being the construction industry, having 3 times the risk. Long working hours, often away from home, often on contracts, so not a guarantee of financial stability. And then add into this the social construct of that idea of how men should be. If you don't fit in with that causing internal and emotional distress and pain, and then having access to lethal means. And we know that men tend to look for solutions to problems, a definitive solution to a problem. Whilst females are twice as likely to make attempts on their own life, males are still 3 times more likely to die by suicide. So we've got the identity factor around middle-agedness, and then throw in this identity factor maybe within job roles as well. And it's like we had this concoction that men, as a result, are more likely to go on to die by suicide because they don't have the tools to deal with the emotions and the confusion and the distress and all those things that come with it.
That's some brilliant insight. I wasn't aware of some of those things, in particular the lethal means. I hadn't even considered that as a potential factor in male suicide, but that makes so much sense. And a lot of what you were saying, I can see played out in your own experience, and when I reflect to my own story as well, I can see that some of those factors were definitely contributed towards thoughts of suicide. So thanks so much for sharing that. Now, there's no doubt there's a lot of misconceptions that exist around suicide as well, and I think it's really important that we highlight some of those as well. So I was wondering if there are any common ones that come up regularly in your work that you could maybe expand on a little?
Yeah, absolutely. The most common one, Chris, is that if we ask someone if they're having thoughts of suicide, we're going to make them think about it. And I always start any of my sessions by asking people, using the analogy of, well, is anyone willing to make a life-changing decision today? And maybe if I marry me, or go put on a mortgage together, or maybe give me all of their salary. And of course, people snigger and they go, well, don't be ridiculous. That's a life-changing decision. And it is usually a bit of a light bulb moment for people, because we make this assumption that if we ask someone if they're having thoughts of suicide and they're not, that actually we can put that thought into their head. Well, no, I wasn't, but now I am. But all the evidence suggests that actually when we do, what we do is we give that person permission to talk about it if they are. We give them permission to say yes to that question. Maybe the permission that no one in their life will ever give them. So that's where I talk about these superhuman strengths. It's like, well, no, I'm not superhuman I can go, hey, Chris, you're going to give me all of your salary for the next year. And you're like, no, don't be ridiculous. But if I can ask someone that question and give them the confidence that I'm a safe space to say yes to that question, that's how amazing someone could be, is that they could genuinely save their life just by giving them the opportunities to say yes to it. So that's the first one. That's the other, the most common myth. The second one is that people that talk about suicide won't go on to do it. Unfortunately, when people talk about ending it all, or they'd say, "Oh, I'd be better off dead," societally, we treat it as a bit of a joke. We tend to have a bit of a dark humour about it. Oh, yeah, you didn't really mean that, did you? Oh, don't, you're not going to do anything silly. And we tend to cover it with humour. And usually it's because of our own barriers that's made us feel uncomfortable, because you can't be thinking about that because, whoa, I don't know how to deal with that. So there is this myth that people that talk about it won't go on to do it. The way I talk about that is that maybe that person does have that ability, or that bit of strength to talk about it, but the reception they're getting is that, it's just attention seeking, and it's not attention seeking. It is that person talking, and they're saying, hey, I am struggling, help me out, and the response they're getting is that the door is closed, we're just going to treat it with humor. Quite often I get asked, what was it, Christo, that made you put your hand up and reach out for support? And it wasn't that. It was someone else reaching into me, because I probably would have never had the strength to do that. People say, oh, it's so brave for people to speak out. It's like, it shouldn't be brave. It should be part of a conversation. We talk about, cancer used to be, we can't say the word cancer, we have to say the big C. We can't say suicide. I encourage everyone to do it. It's like, no, we're not that powerful. We need to talk about it, normalize the subject, because it is so common and it's a massive problem. The third one that I'm always a bit hesitant to talk about is about hindsight, really, because quite often we hear there was nothing that we could have done, it was completely out of the blue, and there were no signs. And we do know that there are some suicides that are out of the blue and there are no signs. But the evidence suggests that the majority of the time there will be signs. But if we don't know what they are, how can we be expected to spot them? So let's go easy on ourselves. If we've never been educated, if there aren't people talking about suicide and what the signs are and how we can hold space and how we can help someone get that support, how can we ever be expected to spot them? And that's not an easy one an easy one to talk about, because quite often people they kind of reflect, because so many people are affected by suicide, and they reflect and they say, oh, well, there were no signs. It was completely out of the blue. And maybe there were, but maybe they didn't know what they were.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. On that note then, about picking up on potential signs that someone might be feeling suicidal, what should people be on the lookout for?
That's a great question, and it's a great question, not an easy answer. And to be as succinct as I can, Chris, is like when they are not themselves. When they are not themselves. Now, I'm not saying when someone isn't themselves that they're definitely having thoughts of suicide, but when they are not themselves, it may be a path that they're on. And it is all well and good knowing what the signs are. We can talk about the language that someone might use. We can see the signs, that they might be socially withdrawing or physically not themselves. Or we can learn about things that have happened to them in the past or things that are happening that might cause them to have thoughts of suicide. But the only way we're going to know what's going on is if we ask them. That's the only way. We can't say, oh, well, they're not themselves, therefore they're having thoughts of suicide. What we can do is put, oh, well, I don't feel like they've been themselves recently, and I've got these signs, and I've got these signs or these symptoms, and then put those together into a position where we can respectfully ask them if they're having thoughts of suicide. That's the only way we're going to know. But in general, I could talk for hours, Chris, but in general, when someone's just not themselves and you get that feeling, maybe it's in your gut, maybe it's in your jaw, maybe it's you just really worried about someone and maybe they are talking about death or writing about death, or maybe they're just doing things that seem out of the ordinary. We talk about a sudden unexplained recovery, where someone has been experiencing poor mental health or mental ill health, and then suddenly, hey, don't worry about me, life's great, don't worry about me, I'm okay. Quite often, unfortunately, it may be that they're having thoughts of suicide because they've seen an end to their pain. They've seen an answer to that pain. It's really complicated, but there are lots of signs.
And I think that going back to what you'd said about asking that question and the importance of doing it, and you're not putting that thought in someone else's head, you should always take that chance, even if there's no shame in asking that question and someone saying no, I don't feel suicidal. Like, ask that question, just even if it's it's no, or if it feels a bit uncomfortable or a bit awkward. Give them that opportunity to respond, because you could end up saving a life.
You put it more succinctly, Chris, than I ever could. Yeah, I do this day in, day out. I talk about it, but that's it. But it's that, but unfortunately, and on when I talk about it quite often, so I will say words, but not as nicely as you did there. Yeah, not as eloquently as you did. And someone on a course will say to me, "Hey, Christo, if I get it wrong, they'll clam up and they'll never speak to me again, and it will change our relationship forever." And respectfully, yes, it might change your relationship forever, but surely it's better that we ask and get it wrong than have got this feeling that we're worried about something, that something's going on, to not ask and find out we've got it right. Surely that balance is better. But you've already highlighted, Chris, that the majority of times, the things that are preventing us from asking that question of someone, they're not their barriers, they're ours. They are the social constructs that exist in society that say we shouldn't talk about this, and that we're going to put an idea into someone's head, and that actually, you're going to make a situation worse. Unfortunately, they are all our barriers. They're not the person that's struggling with or experiencing thoughts of suicide. And it's about us, anyone, knowing what the signs are and smashing through those barriers. Yeah, it might make us feel uncomfortable, but that uncomfortableness that we might have to feel could genuinely save that person's life, as you said. So for me, that's what it's about.
Yeah, 100%. And again, I often reflect on and share my own experience having been in that position myself. And when you talk about the sort of societal norms and that sort of thing, I was the one who was kind of struggling with thoughts of suicide. And I still remember it was my sister who very courageously put me on the spot and asked me, are you thinking about suicide? The first time ever anyone had asked me a question like that, or even talked to me about suicide, and I was taken aback by that. Like, I was on the back foot, like, did not expect it. and in many ways kind of felt like, oh, it was me that felt very uncomfortable and not quite sure about this, because it wasn't a conversation, a topic that we talked about or is talked about in society as a whole. Whereas now, because I've had a number of conversations both during that difficult period, and now I do feel more comfortable asking people about suicide. It has become a lot more normal for me. I think you talked about that sort of normalization and how that's a really important thing we want to work towards, is making suicide something that we can talk about more freely without that level of discomfort or taboo almost.
It's changing. It's definitely changing, Chris, but it's still, I still get messages from people saying, I'm worried about this person they mentioned the S word, and that's how it's written. And it just says to me that we still haven't gone far enough that people are able to say the word. It depends who we're talking to. If we're speaking to someone that maybe English isn't their native language, maybe the word suicide, or maybe there's another way to phrase it. Like, you're thinking about ending your own life. Or if I was speaking to a younger person, maybe I would think about the language I was using to make it as comfortable for them as possible, but definitely still using the language that we need to. That's how we destigmatize it, is by using it.
Thank you for that. Again, highlighting some really, really important points. I just wanted to now talk a little bit more about suicide prevention to see if there was anything more that listeners could maybe take away. So we've obviously talked about asking the question and sort of that normalisation of conversations around suicide. We've talked about some of the signs and symptoms to maybe look out for. Was there anything more that you could add? Is there anything more that we could personally do to help with suicide prevention?
Yeah, I think it's important that we shout about the tools that are available to people. The Samaritans have been around for many, many years, and they're available 24 hours a day. And I don't think they get enough people shout about them. What an amazing job that they do. And they're not just there for people that are in suicidal crisis. They're for someone to feel heard and someone to feel like they are validated and have a space on earth. So for me, it's about highlighting all those other supports. That we got the Samaritans on 116, 123, the text messaging service of Shout, which do a very similar thing. And what I love about Shout is a text messaging service, and you just text the word Shout to 85258, 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. And at the other end of that line, rather than having to use our voice, we can actually text, and we can use the language that comes to us most naturally. So there's that feeling of like, well, I haven't got to get through that barrier of someone judging me of the words I'm going to say, because I'm never going to see them. I may not even speak to that same Samaritan again, that same listener again. But having that connection, which some people find just really, really empowering, is to do it via text message. Wonderful thing about Shout as well, it's completely free, completely confidential, and you don't even have to have credit on your phone to use it. Another a website I chat about, and I hope we can drop a link to it somehow, Chris, is a website called Doc Ready. And Doc Ready prepares people to go and speak to a mental health professional, because, as we explained, getting through the barriers of explaining what's going on in our minds can be really difficult. So maybe we can't do it on the phone, maybe we can't do it via text, but maybe we want to go and speak to a mental health professional, but we don't know what to say or how we're going to say it. So we go to the Doc Ready website, and it gives us a really beautiful, simple way of explaining what's going on for us. It puts it into a PDF so we can email it or have it on us, and it means that other person, it means that they can initiate the conversation. So rather than us having to phone or text, is that they can say, hey, Christo, I see that you're struggling with your thoughts, and sometimes when people... So I think one of the things we need to do as a society is really shout about all of the supports are out there. It's not always just about, getting to the NHS. There are so many charities, there are so many people out there who are there and waiting to support people. And it's about highlighting those as well. So there's just three that can really help people that are struggling.
That's awesome. Yeah, thank you for sharing those. And I'll definitely make sure to add their details into the episode description for anyone who wants to access those. And shout about them, of course, absolutely. Now, I wanted to move away from chatting a little bit about suicide prevention, because we met for a coffee a few weeks ago, and we're both in the position where we run our own businesses, and it was really great to talk to you, because we were talking a little bit about what it's like to run your own business, and it sounds very much like me and you are on the same page with a lot of things, and the challenges that come with running your own business. So I was going to ask you the question, how are you finding running your own business? What is that like?
Honestly, Chris, it's difficult. Right, I'm not going to sugarcoat it or lie. I know there are so many people that set up a business because they want to, or they set up a business because they have this entrepreneurial spirit that is flowing within them in their blood. Yeah, and I don't have that. Put me on a stage talking about something that I care deeply and passionately about, and I get in flow, and the hairs on the back of my neck go up. And that, for me, is the part of the business that I love. The marketing, the sales, the invoicing, the HMRC, and all of that, it just fills me with dread, and there's nervous laughter about it, because it doesn't bring me joy, it doesn't bring me happiness. But I understand that there are things that I have to do in order to do the stuff that I love and the stuff that I genuinely believe can have an impact on the world. So I do find it difficult. I'd love to think that I could get to a stage where I could have other people in the business that could be working, doing that stuff that they genuinely enjoy, like writing policies and things like that. But for me, the bit that lights me up is delivering this message and knowing that someone will leave a training course or a webinar or something, or a coaching session or something that I've done with them, and it will have just made the tiniest of changes to their life. And if I can do that, I'm like, this is why I keep doing what I'm doing. But in answer to the question, I find it really difficult. It doesn't come naturally for me to run the business. I even have this gag reflex when I say it. And people say, "Hey, you should be really confident. You're a business owner," and I'm like, "Oh."
I was going to follow this one up with another question, which is, obviously running the business, as you say, can be very challenging. How do you look after yourself while trying to run the business and keep on top of everything?
I know that it's not for everyone, but for me, it is talking. It is talking. I lie on an extroverted side, but I'm also a bit of an introvert. I find talking through my ideas. My wife is my rock. She will often present me with solutions of, "Christo, would you like me to just listen, or do you want me to help you find a solution?" And for me, that is magic. I find a lot of joy in. I'm not the best at escaping the business. I'll be lying, Chris, if I said to you, "Oh, just switch off at the weekend." That is not true. It's not. My mind is always on, well, what do I need to do to take that next step? And sometimes I know that I don't give my personal life as much attention that I need to. I really enjoy running. I don't do it as much as I should, but I know it gives me those feelings of joy and happiness when I do it. For me, it's talking. It's about getting that exercise. I have 4 wonderful children who kind of remind me every single day that it is about the journey. And, the end is always going to happen. We get born into this world and we will leave this world, and at some time, we don't know when. And I think for me, it is all right trying to, as much as we can. Happiness isn't about the end goal and achieving this nor achieving that. It's genuinely about the journey of doing things. So I think I try, and my way to escape and look after myself is just constantly remind myself, okay, that you don't know what's going to happen tomorrow, so we might as well make the most of now, because that is all we've got.
Great point, especially in light of business stuff. It's like, oh, if only I could get to this point, then I'll be content and happy. But happiness, contentment, you can find right now. I always wrap up the interview with a couple of questions. So the first question is, what advice would you give to men who are finding themselves in a tough place right now?
just take one step. It doesn't matter which direction it is, because when you feel like there is nowhere to go, there always is. And my dear dad has always taught me that. I still can't do a tax return. I can, for the eyes of HMRC, I can. I still am not very good at carving a piece of meat. But he has always said, when the SH1T hits the fan, all you have to do is take one little step. And if someone is really feeling like they have no strength and they feel like the pain of living is just so much, if they can just make that one maneuver, that one little centimetre, inch or millimetre, that can be all it takes to keep them moving and give them momentum, whether that is getting out of bed that day or showering or even switching on the TV or just doing something, because we need to have some momentum. And that can be the smallest step that to other people might seem minuscule, but for them at that time, that might be the pivotal moment that moves them in the right direction.
Yeah, it's spot on. It's something that I talk about a lot with coaching clients and with members in the Strongman, is the importance of just these small steps forward rather than trying to take these gigantic leaps when we inevitably fail to achieve those giant leaps, we end up in a place further away from where we had hoped to be. So it's those little small steps over time that help us grow and improve. So I'm 100% on board with that advice. Going to finish up then the interview with this final question. What one word would you use to describe a strong man, and why?
A strong man is someone that is honest with himself, when they're honest with themselves, because whether they are perceivably bossing life or struggling with life, only when we're honest with ourselves and have that self-awareness will we ever be able to move forward and make those changes we want to make. But unless we're honest with ourselves, we're constantly lying to ourselves or lying to others and putting this mask on and not being ourselves, we're never going to make those changes. So if life is a bit rubbish, be honest with it and say that, life's a bit crap, yeah, but it doesn't mean it can't get better.
Thank you so much, Christo. It's been so good to chat with you. I've really, really enjoyed today's interview. Before we finish up, I always give guests an opportunity just to, again, remind the listeners of who you are, what you do. I know we talked about the fact that you work in suicide prevention, but we didn't really go into details of what it is you actually offer. So the floor is yours. If you want to just take a moment, explain exactly what it is you do and where people can contact you and find you on social medias and websites and all that.
When we spoke earlier about the things I don't enjoy about doing in the business, Chris, and that's marketing.
Sorry, yeah.
I'm Christo Hudson. I run an organisation. It's called the Black Box Approach, because that's what I help people undo, is unbox those things that we tend to normally shy away from. You can find my website, theblackboxapproach.com, where I have a photo where I look like Alan Partridge. I'm always trying to change that. There's also a list of links to some supports on that website. I hang around on LinkedIn as well, so please find me there, Christo Hudson. What do I do? Yeah, I train anyone or organizations how to talk about the stuff that makes us feel a little bit uncomfortable. So I help people unbox the ups and the downs of life. Yeah, that's me.
Amazing. Well, Christo, thank you so much. As I say, it's been really excellent and I always enjoy chatting with you. So thank you again and all the best. Maybe you don't know this already, but if you listen back to episodes in Series 1, you'll notice that I've changed the opening sort of jingle and the voiceover bit. But in Series 1, I talked about how the goal of the Strongmen is not just to keep men on this planet a little longer, but to help them thrive. And what that's referring to is the rates of suicide. One of the main reasons I do what I do is because the rates of suicide in the UK are astounding and not in a good way. Like, it's absolutely horrific, which is exactly why we need more voices and more people like Christo doing that amazing work where he runs training around suicide and suicide prevention. He gets the message out and talks and creates conversations around suicide in order to normalise it a little bit more. And potentially save some lives. And I understand that it might feel a little bit overwhelming when you hear things like suicide is the biggest killer of men under 45, or it's this sort of epidemic that we've got. And you might feel like, well, what the fuck can I do? Like, yeah, it's a national problem. It's probably a worldwide problem. Like, I'm just little old me. I can't be expected to change the world, to change the nation. That's obviously not what we're asking, but I can understand that feeling of like powerlessness. Like, yeah, I can't do anything to change this. This is horrendous, of course, but what can I do? But it doesn't have to be something major. It doesn't have to be like becoming an activist and marching down to Parliament, and I don't know what else you would try and do to solve a national crisis. But it is just the little things. Like, you can impact the people around you just by being more aware of some of the signs, paying attention to how your loved ones are potentially acting or changes in their behaviour, and then asking that question, being brave enough and having the courage enough to ask the difficult question and be okay with the discomfort of that, because as Christo said, that can literally save people's lives and save the lives of the people that you care about most. The only thing I would really want to add as well is to never write anybody off, because in my own experience I know that, or there's a story that sticks in my mind which I may have shared before, is I remember walking into the staff room in my first job as a PT, and we were just generally chit-chatting, and my colleague just turned and said to me, like, Chris, you got to be one of the most happy, upbeat guys that I've ever met. And that was obviously really nice to hear, but it was wildly inaccurate. Well, it was and it wasn't. Like, I was presenting as this very happy, upbeat guy. So that was accurate. It wasn't accurate in terms of I was the most depressed I'd ever been in my life, and I was contemplating suicide on a daily basis. So from that perspective, no, I wasn't the most happy, upbeat guy ever. And that just really highlights how tricky it can be to firstly pick up on the fact that someone may be struggling and feeling this way, but also how important it is just to ask that question if you do pick up on it. Because yeah, as I've made reference to, I have had conversations, or I have a family member ask me straight up about suicide, and although I actually felt quite uncomfortable about the whole conversation, because yeah, I never talked about it before. I thought I might get judged for feeling suicidal and that sort of thing, but actually that unlocked conversations around it. Did it solve the problem? No, I still struggled with suicidal ideation for quite some time before it improved, but it just made me feel heard and validated, and at least somebody was able to support me. I'd allowed someone in to offer that support, to check in on me and make sure that I was managing okay. So yeah, if you take anything away, like I say, make sure it is to ask the question. If you have even just the slightest inkling, just ask, what's the worst that's going to happen? Oh, and before I forget, just a quick reminder that the resources that Christo mentioned in the interview, I have linked in the episode description, so do go check those out and keep them to hand should you ever need them, either personally or to share with a loved one. I'm not going to take up any more of your time for today. Thanks so much for checking out the episode. As I mentioned at the start, do leave me a rating, and if you want to get in touch with the show, I'd love to hear from you. You can do that by emailing chris@thestrongmen.co.uk, or send me a DM on Instagram. You can follow me, Chris Strongman. And until next time, take good care of yourself.